All right, welcome everybody. It's Will Booth from DNA Business Management Solutions, and I'm happy to have you join us today to reduce the risk in accounts payable lunch and learn session we're holding. Today I have the pleasure of welcoming Jack DeBlasio from an account executive at Beanworks. Jack's been an account executive for the last couple of years at Beamworks. He works with clients to better understand how their AP flow and payments works and minimizing the time that clients spend on each step in managing everything from POs to payments. And now, luckily, he's able to show us today at the end of the demonstration a new feature coming from AP Automation for expense management. So I don't want to waste any time. I'm going to hand it. Jack's got the baton, and he's going to walk through the demonstration with us. As I mentioned, we're recording this today, so we'll be sending it out after the meeting. We'll send you an email with the recording if you want to go back through any points. And Jack or Michel Saint-Amand, Michel Samuel and I are happy to answer any questions about Sage AP Automation. I'll put our emails up at the end, or Jack will. All right, so over to you, Jack. Thanks very much for presenting to us today.
Awesome. Thank you, Will. I'm super excited to walk through the webinar and then the product demonstration. So let's kick right into it. Again, like Will said, if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to throw them into the chat box and we'll try to answer them when there's some breaks here. So yeah, what will we be talking about today? We're going to go through the types of fraud, waste, and abuse that businesses are seeing, the impacts of these types of frauds during a crisis, the steps you can take to prevent AP fraud, and then from there, we're going to jump into a quick little product demo and tie it all up with a Q&A at the end. So we've categorized the most common types of risk in AP as phishing scams, duplicate payments, and expense abuse. Now, accounts payable or AP fraud is one of the most common types of fraud, exposing companies to risks that come with operating a business. So these types of frauds can be done by an employee, a group of employees, an external party, or collaboratively by an employee and an external party. So I'll briefly define each of these before we kind of get into the more nitty-gritty details. So what's a phishing scam? First of all, this is an attempt to access a company's account or fraudulently gain access to confidential business information. Up next is the duplicate payments. So according to a 2019 Level research report, this is one of the top payments-related pain points for companies. A business may pay a vendor more than once because they've received the same invoice in different formats, or an employee made a mistake. And lastly is expense abuse. So this happens when an employee exploits a company's expenses for personal gain. So we're going to take a deeper dive into these accounts payable challenges and look at some of the recent research. So to better understand how CFOs and financial teams have been impacted, we're going to walk through a couple studies. So we found that the click rate on phishing attacks has risen from less than 5% to over 40% with COVID-19 scams. 69% of companies are now using audit controls to detect fraud. And in an April 2020 PwC study, 35% of the respondents said that they don't regularly test or audit their controls. We're also seeing that one of the biggest factors driving change right now is remote work. And one of the biggest challenges in the sudden shift to a remote work culture is communication and collaboration. So let's take a look at some real life examples of fraud. So we'll start with an external example. Victims of this, or in this setting, were Google and Facebook. So between 2013 and 2015, both companies were scammed out of more than $100 million. The scammer set up a fake account of an actual business and sent out phishing emails to Facebook and Google. The employees at both companies were used to processing multi-million-dollar transactions with the phishing company that the scammer was falsely posing as. So bottom line, if you don't have transparent approval workflows in place, picking up scams like this can be super tough, as Google and Facebook are exemplifying. Next, we'll go with an internal case of fraud. $4.5 million was embezzled from an Oregon company over a decade by an employee accused of submitting fraudulent invoices for a fake vendor. According to reports, this employee would generate checks in AP to pay this false vendor, wielding their position to then direct those payments to their personal account. The employee reportedly admitted to mail fraud, aggravated identity theft, and tax evasion. And last up, we've got an example of expense abuse. So this here is an interesting story. It was shared by Bob Shoyet, who's a senior CFO. So speaking on this issue, Bob said, and I quote, "The most glaring case I uncovered involved a sales rep who, for many months, expensed $250 to $400 lunches and dinners. The employee claimed that he was entertaining several prospects at a time during these dinners, but during an audit, I randomly matched his calendar to dates of meals on his expense report, only to find his calendar empty." So Bob called up all the restaurants on the sales rep's receipts and found these were all receipts for meals served to a table for two. Bob immediately informed HR, investigated the meal expenses for the past 12 months, and found that the total amount of expense abuse was in the thousands of dollars. So, with all these fresh in our mind, we're going to look into how we can prevent these cases of fraud. So again, we're going to cover phishing scams, vendor management liability, we're going to identify waste, and expense abuse. So for each of these points, we're going to share advice on the steps you can adopt to prevent these without automation. And then we're going to follow up with how automation prevents these issues. So let's start with phishing scams. As I'd mentioned earlier in the webinar, to prevent fraud, we recommend that organizations have at least two levels of approval, one by the manager and the other by the purchaser. You always want to require any purchase to be approved by someone other than the person that bought the goods, otherwise you're leaving them in a position to audit themselves. Best practice is to have the employee's manager approve the purchase, and then lastly have the finance department as the final layer of approval. So why do we want this? The finance department typically has the highest level of knowledge around how fraudsters might be trying to scam a company's finance. So you really want them to be that last layer. Next, you want to look at the signs that you're being scammed. So the most common sign that an email is related to a scam is via the domain. So domain addresses are unique, but fraudsters will purchase domains that look almost identical to legitimate supplier domains with unobvious little differences. So sometimes they'll change just one letter from the domain, looks really similar, and if you're not paying attention, you can get caught. So we saw this in the example of Google and Facebook that we discussed earlier. You also want to be on the watch for invoices that are missing key information like an address or a phone number, supplier prices that seem either too high or too low from what you're normally used to purchasing, and vendors that use free email providers like Gmail or Outlook instead of company domains. So that's without automation. With automation, you can prevent phishing scams. So there's three kind of key points here. A, automation detects fraud before it's paid via an automated payment solution. Within automation, you're also able to create multiple online approval channels that increase accountability and therefore enforce practices such as verification of vendors and detection of suspicious invoices. Automation also allows users to have a distinct approval workflow at the payments level. So now that we have an understanding of the top challenges, we'll share some recommendations that you can adopt outside of this automated solution. So again, to summarize, we recommend at least two levels of approval authority, two, a separate approvals process for invoices and payments by separating roles for the approvals at the invoice and payments level. You reduce the chances for funds to be rerouted or otherwise misappropriated. Third, you want to verify vendor details by visiting their website, calling their number, and cross-checking the physical address. And lastly, that delegation of authority. So this applies primarily to determining who should have the authority for specified spending limits within certain categories of expenditure. So now that we understand the types of fraud, let's take a look at a 2019 level research highlighting the top challenges with AP. So this graph here represents the top AP pain points as voted by finance professionals within SMEs. So percentages are the number of respondents who identified these challenges as their top pain points. The reason we look at small, medium enterprises is because based on the research, they often have the higher efficiency costs. So these effects are also related in their soft costs, such as staff productivity, process efficiency, and data accuracy. Again, SMEs typically experiences challenges around manual data entry and routing, as well as higher rates of lost invoices. So when it comes to vendor management liability, first up, we recommend creating a form to initiate any changes when a banker needs to update their banking details. So when a vendor asks for these details to be changed, you should have a process in place for these kind of requests. 2, positive pay, so that mismatched items are identified and reported for either pay or no pay decisions. And lastly, contact management and escalation procedures to ensure that there is only one person in the vendor organization that you are taking changes from. So how does automation support vendor management and liability? A third-party payment solution can provide vendor management, and most will indemnify 100% of vendor payments. So with automation, you're receiving faster reconciliation. Again, that third-party payments liability, so your banks don't assume the liability for fraud, and the inability to reclaim those payments can put companies at risk. Third up, you can outsource vendor data management. This helps keep that sensitive data secure within a third party. And lastly, the outsourced solution provider will also manage vendor and bank onboarding for you. Moving on to how to identify waste without automation. So we recommend auditing spend into different categories to identify any overlaps or oddities. And secondly, using purchase order matching to streamline and control purchasing activity while gaining more visibility into your forecasts. So how does automation help in preventing waste? First of all, it flags duplicate invoices and payments with the system, so you're not prompted to pay these documents twice. 2, two-way syncs ensure automatic reconciliation, elimination of data entry errors, and verification of which invoices have been paid. 3, it restricts paying unapproved invoices until the approvals process is complete. And lastly, the system eliminates reissuing of payments. So moving on to advice on how to combat expense abuse without automation, we recommend A, auditing employee expenses at a regular basis. If you remember in the example we had discussed earlier, the CFO audited the sales rep expenses that were noted as client lunch dinners, but were actually personal meals. We also recommend having a policy documented and signed by employees so that everyone's on the same page, and knows exactly what constitutes as a company expense and what doesn't. And finally, approver accountability procedures. It's generally recommended, again, that a person not approve their invoices, but that the employee's manager, as well as someone from the finance department, providing that final layer so that you have that approval accountability. So with automation, you get digital controls to control expense abuse, visibility into expense abuse and where the source of that expense abuse is, and also faster reimbursements with the elimination of paper checks. Now, once organizations adopt an AP automation solution, they greatly improve their risk management capabilities through improved visibility, tracking, and controlling invoice and payment processes. We can all agree that AP doesn't have to be the most chaotic department in your business. By opting for automation, increasing visibility, and using solid digital systems, you can significantly improve your entire accounts payable department. This makes it easy to see exactly where those vital funds are going and how they're being processed and managed. So with that, let's jump into a product demo to show you exactly what automation can do.
All right, looks good, Jack.
Great. So again, if questions come up, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat box and we'll try to address them at the end of each section here. But let's start off kind of with an overview of the Beanworks interface. So before we jump into the kind of nitty-gritty details of the software, I like to do a high-level overview of the user access and experience so that everyone has a really good understanding of what's happening the entire time. So over here on the left, we've got our 3 modules: POs, invoices, payments, as well as our new expense module. Again, invoices are really the bread and butter of the software. Both the expenses, the POs, and the payments modules are totally optional. We've broken the user experience of the application into the workflow here at the top. So invoices typically flow from left to right, starting at either the Create or In Progress tab, and they'll graduate to each next step until they finally reach the archive level. In the center of the screen is your workspace or your work queue, and your organizational structure is over here on the left. So this is where we can mirror your organization structure and can segment according to entities, departments, divisions, or locations. You can really get as creative as you'd like. So in this example, you can see we got the parent company here at the top. Next, we've got the associated entities. And then we've segmented these further by departments and divisions. Using a software like Sage AP Automation, you're going to have the ability to create as many users as you'd like at no additional cost. So we do this to ensure that you have an accurate audit trail. With some of the other providers in the space that have license-based fees, companies are put in that position where they're choosing between the integrity of their audit trail and user-based fees. With Sage APA, you'll be able to add in as many colleagues as you'd like at no cost. Now, with that being said, you can also control which segments of the application users have access to at the modular levels here, the workflow levels, as well as the organizational structure levels as well. So what does that mean? For example, someone that primarily focuses on purchasing, they may only be given access to the PO module. They won't see invoices or payments. They'll just go in, they'll log in, they'll see the purchase order module, and they can create those requisitions there. Likewise, at the workflow level, someone that's just responsible for approving invoices may only have access to the approval step in the workflow. And lastly, down here at the organizational structure, someone in sales may only be set up to see the sales invoices and workflows, whereas the accounting and finance team are probably going to be set up to see everything. So each profile is totally customizable, it's flexible, and it's going to be based on the way you want to set up your users. Now, what you'll notice here as I navigate through the different modules is that the user experience remains pretty much the same except for color. So we've gone from green to blue. We built the system this way to make training fast and easy. Once you've learned one module, you've essentially learned them all. And because we built the system like this, we can typically stand clients up within a 30-day period or so. So that's it from a user experience overview. Any questions, again, don't hesitate to throw them in the chat box. But with that, let's jump into how we're actually going to get invoices into the system. So we're going to jump into the in progress step of the invoices module. There are two ways to get invoices into the system, and that's going to really default to the way the documents are received, so either electronically or paper-based. If you receive electronic invoice copies via email, we'll set you up with an inbox for our system, and you can completely skip the create step here and have the invoices flow directly to the in progress stage where they will be processed immediately. The second option is to get them into the system via an upload at the create step. So this is where you can scan a batch of invoices and drag and drop them into the system, which we'll get into in a few moments here. Most companies nowadays are receiving about 70 to 90% of their invoices electronically. So again, this create step can be completely skipped, but for those that are still receiving paper-based copies, rest assured we'll be able to get them into the system as well. And before we jump into the details of create, there are typically two ways accounting teams store invoices. Either they have a bunch of filing cabinets where they split out the paper copies and file each document individually, or they scan them into their document repository system like Google Drive one at a time in a PDF format. And as most of you are aware, that exercise can be pretty cumbersome. So we built our Creates tab so that those steps can be eliminated completely. Here, you can click the Upload button, drag and drop a batch of scanned invoices into the software. And when you do that, you'll now notice however many pages your document is, it's going to populate like so. So in this case, we got a 12-page document. This is saying that this is one invoice that's 12 pages long. Let's say that these were separate copies. All you need to do is click the split button, and that's going to segment each page into its own unit. If you receive invoices that are multiple pages long, again, you're always able to drag and drop to correspond the bodies appropriately. So now we've got an invoice that's 3 pages long, another that's 2 pages long, so on and so forth. And once we're done organizing, we'll click Save, Create, and these invoices are going to join those electronic copies at the In Progress tab. So for most companies, the filing of the invoices takes place at the end of the process, but by using our software, we're taking care of the filing the minute the invoice is in the system. The next step here is the categorizing and tagging of the invoices. Now, most AP professionals spend about 57% or more of their time getting the invoices into the system, tagged, coded, and then submitted for approval. Once in Beanworks, we're taking care of the lion's share of that work for you. Our software automatically tags the invoice overnight. So when I click in here, you'll see that the vendor details are automatically populated, the invoice number, the dates, the due dates, the description, the subtotals, the totals, and the taxes. So all that's going to be left is the line items table. And we even have a few ways of taking care of that for you as well. Most invoices have fairly repetitive coding, and our system is smart enough to remember historical entries. So for invoices that are coded consistently, all AP teams have to do is click the Smart Code button here on the top right of the screen, and it will code the line items for any recurring invoices. If it's a one line item invoice, boom, it's done. So you're probably wondering, how does Smart Code do this? It's taking into account 3 key factors. 1, the legal entity that the invoice is being coded to. Next up is the owner or the person that's coding the invoice. And lastly, it's the vendor. And so based on those 3 criteria, we'll click Smart Code, and that's going to fill in the line items for us. Now, the second way we can automate the line item coding is if the invoice is matched to a PO. Now, a lot of people don't have formalized purchase order workflows in place, but with Beamworks, we have a PO system, and we encourage everyone to take advantage of it because not only does it make coding faster, but it also makes it easier to forecast and control your budget. So if an invoice has a corresponding PO, our software is going to automatically link the PO to the invoice, as you can see here. And once matched, all you're going to have to do is click the PO adoption button, and it's going to allow you to adopt the line items here from the PO. So we can select them, adopt, and it's going to fill in the line items matrix so that we don't have to re-enter that information. So we found that with that combination of smart code, PO adoption, and then auto capture at the header level of the invoices, we're typically able to eliminate about 83 to 90% of the line item coding. Now for the odd invoice that smart code or PO adoption can't capture, you can always go in. It's a direct integration with your financial system. So we'll be able to pull in all your list of accounts as well as your vendors, and you can make any changes you need. At this point, we'll click Save and submit this invoice for approval before we sync it back to your financial system. Now, this is really where we're going to be formalizing those approval channels to make sure only legitimate invoices are being pushed through the financial system. This is where we're going to catch those that are potentially fraudulent or illegitimate invoices. So like I was saying earlier, the average company typically has 2 levels of approval because, again, they usually want the person that bought the goods to approve them, but also the manager of that person to provide that second layer so they're not auditing themselves. So what does that mean for an AP clerk? We have to make a spreadsheet where we write down our invoices and keep track of them as we send them out to people, or maybe we're just losing track of them completely once we start putting them on people's desks or emailing them out for approval. So our software takes care of that approval tracking for you by notifying the approvers when they have invoices waiting, which spares your AP team from receiving vendor calls inquiring about late or unpaid invoices. So at this screen, this is what approvers are going to see. They'll receive an automated email. If they're the end approver, they'll have their queue of unapproved invoices here, and they can go in and see the invoice details, the actual invoice image, the line items, and then approve or reject from this screen. What you'll notice, if you click the reject button here, the comment section highlights in red. You're not able to reject without leaving a comment, and that's to make sure that the person submitted knows exactly what needs to be changed so that there's less back and forth the second time around. Next, Just to preface, we also have a mobile application, so users that are out in the field are able to approve or reject from their mobile device. Now that we know how to approve and reject invoices, we'll quickly jump into the back end of the software here to show you how we can create that automated routing. So as many of you are aware, the challenge with having multiple approval channels and basing those approvals on different criteria like the value of the invoice or the account code that it's related to, and potentially even the department it belongs with, is that managing that complexity multiplies itself as you add additional approval criteria. So we've built our software to make sure AP teams can maintain their approval channels, but make the burden of managing that complexity disappear for AP clerks, which gives you tighter controls to make sure that only legitimate invoices are flowing through your business. So this is how we're going to build an approval channel. As you can see, selected the company. And the first step here is to name that approval channel. So this example, we'll create one that's based off of a GL account, a dollar value, and we'll go with vendor as well. So here you can set a minimum, you can set a maximum, you can also set a range, and then all your standard lists from your financial system are going to populate here. So I'm going to select vendor, I've got account, you can also do it at the departmental level as well. So when I click save and I open this channel up, you've now got a pretty good visual representation of what's happening. So just fill that in real quickly. So you probably guessed it's saying that any invoice from the Green Bean company that's above 50K associated to these three accounts, 1050, 1055, and 1087 from vendor ABC Furniture is going to be routed to this approver here. So like we were saying, you typically want to layer your approvals so that someone is not auditing themselves. So in this case, we'll drag and drop the CEO over or whoever you'd like, and you can add them as the approver here. So first, this invoice is going to Jill, and next it's going to be going to Sally for that final layer of approval. You can set these up however you'd like, and you can also group users by together. So let's say two users have similar authority, Tom and Sally. This is saying first it's going to go to Jill, and then either Tom or Sally, whoever gets there first, can push it through for the final step. Now, we've covered how to eliminate the manual routing and tracking the invoices. I'll quickly show you how we can eliminate manual follow-up as well. So the routing's taken care of in this section. We'll go to General, and under User Management, approvals can be set up on an action basis as well as for daily reminders. So what that means, if I click in here, this user, now anytime they have an approval outstanding in their queue, they'll receive daily notifications from the software so that your team doesn't have to follow up with the bottlenecks in the process. Lastly, we've approved our invoices and they've all been driven to the export step in the workflow. So now we know we've got a queue of legitimate invoices that have passed that approval accountability test. So instead of re-entering this information back into your financial system, it's going to be 3 simple commands to sync this information over. So again, as you can see, denoted by this little green symbol here, approved. This is your queue of approved invoices. And to drive these back to your financial system, it's 3 simple commands: actions, export selected, data, and this is going to flow this information seamlessly back into your financial system. Now, last step here, once we've finished that export, everything is going to drive to the archive tab. And so like I was saying at the beginning of this process, we're taking care of the filing of the invoices at the very beginning of the process, and now we've coded them as well. So the archive tab is really acting as your new historical database for all the invoices that have gone through your software, and they're completely indexed with all the actions taken on them indexed as well. So if you sort your invoices by vendor, you'll be able to go in here, select basically any range of filter you'd like. So in this case, we'll go with vendor. Your list of vendors will populate. You'll be able to select which ones you'd like to filter. And when you highlight this, these custom filters are really acting like your electronic folders. That same level of control is up here. So if we really quickly want to drill into a specific invoice, you can select the documents that we've filtered on and then generate a report. So with Beanworks, you have the ability for CSV or PDF reports. We'll generate a PDF because that's unique to the Beanworks software. When I open this up, you've now got a summary of the invoices here with the totals at the bottom. And if I click on the hyperlink, it takes you to the invoice copy, the details, the line items, and then the approval history directly below. So you can see exactly who's approved these invoices and make sure everyone's held accountable. So that covers it from the invoice workflow. Again, I'm keeping my eye on the chat here. If there's any questions that pop up, please don't hesitate to ask the questions. But with that, from here, we'll jump into the payments module, and then we'll quickly do a quick overview of the expenses module after that. So, like I said, at the invoice level, this is your queue of synced and approved documents. If you decide to leverage an automation solution for payments, all of these bills are going to automatically waterfall to the create step of the payments module. So here's where you can select the bills that you want to pay. You've got your list of aged payables up here at the top. The system automatically matches vendor invoices together so that you can pay multiple invoices with one payment. And once we've selected the bills, we'll click create. And these are going to drive, as you probably guessed, to the in progress step of the workflow. At the in progress step is where your team has that control to decide which type of payments you're going to be sending out. So, like I was saying earlier, one of the key benefits of using an automated solution is that the third parties can manage the vendor onboarding for you, and they'll indemnify any payments that were made or illegitimately. So here, we offer three key methods. It's going to be either EFT ACH, check, or virtual credit card. And when you log in, it's automatically going to default to the payment method that the vendor prefers because our payments partner will have done that vendor onboarding for you. All your team is going to have to do is select the bank account that they'd like to release the funds for, and whether or not they want to set this for auto release, which just means after that distinct approval at the payments level, the funds will be sent out automatically with no further intervention. Once the payment details look good, we're going to click Save and Submit for approval. Again, I want to stress that this approval is totally distinct from the invoice, the approval at the invoice level. So this is to control here. Potentially you want to have someone from finance doing that final review before the invoice is sent out. So at this approval step, again, to set up the logic, it's the same way I described at the invoices level. And instead of taking your pen and signing off on a paper check and then someone cutting that check, putting it in the envelope, stamping it, and then mailing it out, all your team is going to have to do, or all that approver is going to have to do, is give their digital authorization like so. They can also reject it as well if they determine that this is not the right amount of funds or something's off with this bill. Assuming it's approved, if we've set it for auto release, the funds are automatically going to be sent out. But if we haven't set it for auto release, there's one last step here to release the funds. So we'll select the bills and click release the payment. From here, everything is going to migrate to the paid tab, which is really just like your sync step at the invoices level. And this is now to update those invoices that we've sent over to your financial system as finally paid. So to do that, again, we'll select, we'll click export, and now we've got reconciliation in both softwares. We've got approvals at the invoice level, we've got approvals at the payments level, and this has really made sure that everything that we've processed, both at invoices and the funds we've sent out, are legitimate to real suppliers. Next, we'll jump into a quick overview of the expenses module. So this is super exciting for us. Again, expenses are in beta right now. The full version is going to be launched very soon. But to give you an idea of the workflow, we'll kind of do a quick walkthrough again. The interface has just got a little bit of some changes. So just to give everyone a really good sense of what's happening here. So in the center of the screen, again, is your workspace or your work queue. Directly beside that is going to be your employees' list of receipts as well as their list of reports. So as you can see that I'm highlighted on receipts right now, it drops down into a list view showing you the statuses of the various receipts that have been uploaded to the software. So you can see those that are unreported, which just means they're not associated to a report, those that are incomplete, as well as those that are complete. If I click on reports, you get the same list of statuses. So you'll see the reports that are open, those that have been rejected, submitted, as well as reimbursed. So the way to kind of think of the structure of this application is that a report is a collection of receipts. So let's begin. How are we going to do this? So at the receipt step here, first step is to upload a receipt and tag it with the appropriate information. I want to make sure everyone's aware, this is the desktop version of the expenses module. Users will also have access on their mobile application. So if they're out for lunch or whatever it is, or whatever receipt they're submitting, they can take a photo of it on the go, upload it through their mobile device, and start the process that way instead of waiting till they get to a computer. Interface looks similar, it's just formatted for a mobile device. So when I click new receipt here, this is the first step in getting the documents in. So I'm going to drag and drop a receipt. It's going to upload in my sidebar here. Now, most employees will be designated to a home entity, so they won't need to select one from the drop-down menu. It's typically just going to populate for you based on the user that you've got set up. And our next step is just to fill in this information. So employees can either assign their expense to a new report or an existing report that they've got here. So I'm going to assign it to the Sage Expenses Conference. I'll select my vendor, which in this case is, the merchant, which is Golden Stars Taxi, the purchase date. You can put a description if you'd like, dollar value. And then if the receipt had multiple line items, you'd be able to assign that as well. So you can add multiple lines here. Now, the last piece is to put the category in. So each category in this dropdown can be linked to a specific GL code. So for a more visual representation, I'm just going to jump into the back end of the software to show you how we can hard code expense categories to the right GL accounts to make the tagging of the receipts seamless for those users that aren't really privy to the accounting function. So as you can see, each of these lists of categories is assigned to a GL account here. Now, again, like I was saying, most employees will be able to figure out which category their expense falls into. So for those submitters that don't have a great understanding of accounting, the category scoping here makes it super easy to fill in the details of the receipt before it's submitted to the accounting department. Once everything looks good, we're going to click Create. And now this completed receipt is either going to be assigned to the new report or the existing report like we've shown in this example. So we've got this completed receipt here, and the link to the expense report is going to populate directly below. And so when I click the link here, it's got the report, and I'll jump in, and it's now showing me a collection of all the receipts that this user has assigned to this specific expense report. And you can see the statuses here on the left. When the employee is ready to submit their completed report, instead of sending, a folder with all the receipts in it at the end of the month, or just kind of dropping them on the accounting team's desk, they'll be able to submit electronically like so. And when they do that, the accounting department is then this report is then going to be directed to the accounting department at the invoice module. So when I click on this link, you'll now see what the accounting team is going to see. So you've got your collection of receipts, images here at the top or in the center of the screen, all your invoice details here, as well as the line items which represent each distinct receipt. So the vendor in this case is going to be the employee, so we'll select the appropriate vendor, and we'll go from there. Once everything checks out, we'll click Save. I'm going to submit for approval, and then the workflow is going to follow very similar steps again. So we can build out distinct approval channels at the expense level. So anytime an employee receives or submits their expense report, it can go to their appropriate managers or someone from the finance team, whoever's going to be responsible for making sure that those expenses are legitimate. Similar process, we'll approve or reject the report. And they're going to then migrate to the expense side of things, to the export side of things, which is where we're going to do that final sync over, post it to the financial system. And then at the archive level is where you're going to have that historical filing cabinet of all the receipts that you've run through the system as well. So that's a quick high-level overview of expenses. Again, I know we're kind of coming close to the hour here, so thank you everyone for joining today. If you have any questions, again, please don't hesitate to drop those in the chat. I'll really quickly put our contact information here. Don't hesitate to reach out to me, Will, or Mike, and we'll be happy to get something more personalized set up if you want to deeper dive into any of the modules. But again, thanks to everyone for joining today. I'm glad we were able to make it happen. Audio was working, and we look forward to chatting soon. Will, over to you.
Hey, Jack, thanks a bunch. Great presentation. We do have some questions here. So the first one, Jack, is how long are copies of the PDF invoices kept in archive with Beanworks?
Great question. So we hold all documents in the archive tab for the industry standard of 7 years. And if you need to hold those for longer, you can always, again, generate those index reports and do it on a timeline basis so that you have all your financial information and you can store that as well. But again, the average is the standard, we hold it for the standard, industry standard of 7 years. Okay,
perfect. And of course, yeah, like you said, you could download your own copies too as well, right? And keep them.
You got it.
Like the report that you showed. We have clients that do that once a month or every quarter.
Yep.
Where they download all the invoice history and keep it as a report. Second question, when the information gets imported from Beamworks to Sage 300 or ACPAC as it used to be known, which module does it get recorded into the AP or GL? So you want to go ahead and take that one?
If you want to take it, go ahead, but I can answer that as well, whatever.
Well, yeah, I mean, for AP and payments, it'll be imported as an open batch into either an invoice batch or a payment batch, which eventually will flow through the GL. You get a chance to look at it and approve it one more time before posting, but it'll flow into the GL through the subledger, correct?
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
And same with expenses as well, right? Because expenses basically flow in much like an AP invoice.
That's right. It's going to follow a very similar process to the invoices.
Yeah, and we didn't show it today because we wanted to show the new features, but there's also POs, which Jack mentioned at the beginning. So you can sync the POs if you have the PO module in Sage 300, or if you don't have the PO module and don't want to get it, you can use their PO module and send the POs out through Sage AP Automation. If the vendor sends back the invoice with the PO number on it, they'll automatically match there and then flow into AP. And of course, the receipts will get matched, and then you'll have all your right back down to the GL eventually. So it all syncs together. That's the beauty of Sage AP Automation. No limit on the number of users that can be in the AP Automation side, because in the back end, it's syncing with Sage 300, but you don't have to be a Sage 300 user. So you could set up people as expense employees or PO employees or both, as well as AP and payments. So it makes a nice web-based add-on, which you can use to enhance your Sage 300. And as Jack mentioned, there is a mobile component. So just a couple more questions here. Which payment methods are supported? Did we go over that, Jack?
That's right. So we offer 3 methods. If you're in USA, it's going to be ACH. In Canada, it'll be EFT. And then the last 2 are the same, either paper checks or virtual credit card payments.
Right. And if you do have a large number of things like wire transfers and international payments, we can talk to the Beanworks payments team. They can support that too.
You've got it. Exactly.
Yeah. So you have options there. You can still pay out of Sage 300 at the end. You can approve the invoice and then pay as you normally do, or pay through the AP Automation side. And there's benefits to both, and we can discuss that with anybody that has it. What kind of customer support is included? Was one of the questions asked.
That's great. So each Sage AP Automation account has a dedicated customer success manager. So anytime you have technical issues, you'll be able to contact that rep via phone, live chat, or email support, and they'll always be there for technical issues. And with some of our plans, there's differences with professional services. So for any more customizations or want to consult our CPAs that we've got on the team, that's something that we can take a look at, and that's going to vary on different situations. But anything technical, your dedicated customer rep will be the person assigned to you.
Yeah, and there's a question here kind of follows on to that about the setup, Jack, and how long does it take?
Yeah. So setup, we really can move at your pace. It's really going to depend on the team's availability. I've seen setups take place in as little as a week. It can go as long as, or it can go up to 4 weeks. We're going to move at your pace. The goal here is to typically get everything up and running within a 30-day period.
Yeah, and from what I've seen for the many clients we already have using it, it's usually, like you said, a couple of weeks. The first connection call with the team is basically just to set up the sync tool and get the data into Sage AP automation from your Sage 300. Make sure it's communicating. That takes 10 or 15 minutes. And you get some homework to do, basically kind of mapping out how you want to do your approval flows. Typically, we start with the AP side and get people comfortable with that, but you could add payments, you could do POs. As Jack said, it's up to you, but you can flow through, one or more modules, and it really is a couple of calls over a couple of weeks and a little bit of training, and you're ready to go. And the team at Beanworks is great to work with. It's not hard at all. It's all on a Zoom meeting, and you'll find it very easy. We answered the can I pay at a Sage 300. Jack, how much, maybe you can talk to this, how much time savings do clients tend to see processing invoices this way through, after they've moved off of the old kind of paper-based and signature process, manual?
For sure. Absolutely. So typically, we break that down by the time that's spent on each step of the workflow, and then we can set up a call to kind of run through each step to determine what we estimate the time savings will be. On average, we find that the lion's share of the time is spent on data entry, and typically we're able to save around 83% of the time on the data entry component, again with using smart code, auto capture, and then PO adoption. At the approval side of things, typically, we can eliminate all the time spent managing approvals because the system's going to pick up on those various loading factors and then just route to the right person automatically. And then depending on whether or not we're going to be using our payments module, we eliminate all the time spent on cutting the checks and basically managing the vendors on that front. So it's anywhere in the kind of 50 to 70% range as well on the payment side. And any steps of re-entry are also eliminated. So it depends on a case-by-case basis, and would be happy to jump on a phone call with anyone who wants to do a really granular look at what the time savings would be for their setup.
Yeah, and that leads me into one or two more things, Jack. Just in talking about payments, if you're having issues today, and clients are, because you're working from remote, of course, during this pandemic, but you still do printed checks and you have two signers, if you use check payments through Sage AP automation, for less than $2, they will, you do the approval, the checks are printed in a secure facility and mailed to your clients, and the signatures will be on the checks. So you don't have to go into the office anymore. You just approve through the app, and then, the payment method is chosen. Aside from ACH, I know there are still people out there using checks and for various reasons can't get off it. So it can even help with that today. You don't have to print the checks in Sage 300 and have somebody come in and sign them and then fold them and stuff them and mail them. They'll take care of that too. And like I said, including the postage, it's less than $2. So per check, pretty easy to do. And you can just take care of it that way. So I think that's all the questions, and we're pretty much out of time. I want to thank you, Jack, very much for setting up this demo for us and providing us with all this great information. As Jack mentioned, we're happy to jump on a call with you. If you want more information, you want to see something in more detail, you want to go over it again, just get in contact with us, Mike, myself, or Jack, and let us know, and we can do that, pretty easily. And like I said, if you want to see the PO side, we can do that as well.
Absolutely.
I will be sending out an email shortly by tomorrow with the recording of this session. And again, you can walk through it and share it with your your teammates who may have not been able to see this, and just give us a ring and let us know if you want to chat more. We'll be in touch. All right. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and thanks a bunch, Jack.
Cheers, folks. Bye-bye.
All right.